right now, I know that you all are waiting for it. We have one of our keynote speakers ready on the stage. So I think that without any mumbling from my side, please join me welcoming on stage one of the creators of Diablo, famous David Brevik.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I apologize if I get a little stuck here. I'm recovering from last night still. I had, I don't know what the hell happened, but there's a missing 5 hours. I'll just say that. It's, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It is a pleasure to be here. I've really been impressed with the show, with Poland. This is my first time here, first time in Poland, first time in Krakow, and it's a great show, and you guys have been very warm, and it's there's just a great industry and a great vibe here, and I really appreciate that. Anywhere I go, you know, it's really nice to see such a vibrant gaming community and people that are very passionate about making games, and it shows, and it's just a real pleasure to be around that kind of thing. You know, when I was young and the video game industry was starting, and I remember the very first game developers conference in San Jose. It was actually in San Jose at that time, or maybe it was in Santa Clara, I can't remember. And, you know, the whole thing was about this big. So when I started in the games industry, 25 plus, oh my God, I'm old, years ago, you know, it was just such a small industry, and it was kind of geeky hobby, and it's just changed dramatically. And to see, to go all over the world now and see people that are just enthusiastic about creating games is it's just a wonderful thing to be a part of, and it definitely shows here in Poland. So thank you very much. All right, let's talk a little bit about, this is the 20th anniversary of the creation of Diablo. Well, let's first, before we get into that, let me talk a little bit about who I am. Who the hell is this guy on stage even talking? You know, my name's David Brevik, as everybody's said. I don't know if you caught that. And I was president of Blizzard North for about 10 years, about 9.5 years. And I was the lead programmer on Diablo 1 and 2, and I was one of the co-creators and designers of the game. Myself and Max and Eric and a few others were really involved in the design, and that was the original concept creator. The original idea for Diablo came from me long ago in the early 80s, may even been, early 80s, not even mid 80s. So Diablo was released on the last day of 1996. Some places got the game on the final day of the year, on New Year's Eve. Some places didn't get till the first, like the 3rd or the 4th of January because of New Year's Day and shipping issues and stuff. But on the West Coast of the United States, it was released on the 31st of December 1996. So this is the 20th anniversary for most people. Some people, it's the 19th anniversary because it came out in January. So, so where did Diablo come from? Well, this is the San Francisco Bay Area. There's San Francisco in the foreground. There's Oakland in the beyond the bay. And I grew up sort of. I moved all over the place, but my last few years of high school were spent here in the Bay Area at the base of Mount Diablo. And that's exactly where the name came from. When I moved to the Bay Area, I didn't know any Spanish. I pretend I know Spanish now, but I don't really know that much Spanish. And when I found out what the name meant, I said, someday that is going to be the name of one of my games, because that is just awesome. And so I kind of kept that in my back pocket, and I started designing this game, Diablo, and I was heavily influenced by a lot of different products at the time. Mostly, I knew I wanted to make RPGs. I knew I wanted to make games. I'm one of those rare people that knows exactly what they want to do from a very early age. I started programming when I was in 6th grade. I taught myself to program. My dad brought home an Apple II Plus eventually, which seemed, I was listening to John Romero's talk yesterday, and he said, his first computer was an Apple II Plus as well. So anyway, I taught myself to program on that, as well as I went into school. They had computers at school that were kind of mainframe, large computers, room-sized. In fact, the very first computer I ever programmed didn't even have a screen. It actually just printed out. It was like a printer computer. I don't even know how to describe that, but and I used to play Lunar Lander on that thing, which is this game. Anyway, it would, like, every move it would just print out, and there would be this big pile of paper at the end of the night. That went over real well. Anyway, I started working on the design for this game, Diablo, and it was mainly, an RPG. I knew I wanted to make RPGs. I knew I wanted to make computer games, and I focused on making, kind of a wizardry or those style of games, kind of clone, and we had multiple people and classes and things like that, and I was really into D&D, and I still am really into D&D, and it was a huge influence on me, but I knew that someday I'm going to make an RPG named Diablo. Now, I went to school, I went to university, and there I started playing Rogue, and then the game design radically changed after that. I knew that, this was something that I really wanted to do, and I wanted to call it Diablo. I wanted to make a rogue-like game, and so that was really the origin of the pitch, was from my influence in playing at the university on the Unix machines in the lab for endless hours of dying and dying and dying and dying over and over again in those roguelikes. So eventually, myself, I graduated, and then met two people at this company, this clip art company, Max and Eric Schaefer, these brothers, the artists, and the three of us decided to make a company after a few years after we had met, and we called it Condor, and we started making games. I was able to get game contracts before I made my own company. I was a technical director at Iguana Entertainment, and their big claim to fame was the NBA Jam games, and so they moved to Texas, and I didn't want to move to Texas, so I stayed in the Bay Area, and I created Condor with Max and Eric, and we knew we wanted to make PC games, and we had this idea for Diablo, and we were trying to sell it, and it just wasn't going over very well. We pitched it 20 plus times to publishers, and publishers were saying, RPGs are dead. Nobody plays RPGs. No, and it was kind of true. It was, at the time, RPGs were dead. Nobody was making them. They weren't selling. It was kind of a disaster, but I knew that this game was going to be something special, and so we continued. So we were doing all these kind of other games, these contracts where we were doing a lot of porting and things like that of games, as well as original development. and during that time, we still had our dream that we were going to make this PC game, that we were making games on the Sega Genesis and the Game Boy and the Game Gear and things like that. At the time, the handhelds and whatnot. I mean, we had my very first game was on Atari Lynx, and so this is very early 90s. And so we came up with this idea for Diablo, and the pitch for Diablo is very different than the way it turned out to be. So this document, the original pitch for Diablo, you can go online and you can get this on my website. If you go to graybeardgames.com, there's a link. You can go and to my blog, and then there's a link in there to the actual PDF of the original Diablo design document if you want to take a look. So the original pitch was turn-based, single-player, DOS, expansion packs like Magic the Gathering. So what this was is like DLC before DLC existed, and permadeath, all of which didn't make the game. None of this was actually turned out to be true. So and there was one other thing, claymation. So a few years ago, Blizzard made a cute little video about Diablo's anniversary. And in it, they said, the original pitch for Diablo had claymation, which is true, technically, but isn't really true. We were doing claymation, stop-motion video, for about 10 seconds. At the time, there was a game called Primal Rage in the arcades. And funny how the name of that character is Blizzard, and the other character is Sauron. I don't know how they got away with that. And the Blizzard's blue, too. So we saw this game in the arcade, and I thought that it had a really unique look. And I thought, we could do this as well. We could model all of we had several people that worked for us at the time that were very good at not only just art in general, but good sculptors. And so I said, let's think about maybe we could do stop motion video for the characters, for the enemies and the characters in the game. And then we started to test it, and in about 2 days we changed it. We're like, oh my God, that's a lot of work. That's a terrible idea. So we changed it. So it was claymation for about 2 days, but it's a good story. It's a better story than actual reality of it was 2 days of development in 2 years. So at the time, we really wanted to make this game. We were doing a game called Justice League Task Force. This is a game on the Sega Genesis, published by Sunsoft and Acclaim, and it's a fighting game, like a Street Fighter clone that we were making, and it was Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman, Flash, Aquaman. Yes, Aquaman. I'm not really sure why his level wasn't underwater, but and so we were making this game, and we showed up at a convention at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas, and this was before E3 existed, so it was, a long time ago. And we show up, and we find out that somebody else is making the same game, but for the Super Nintendo. And wait, what? The publisher had never said that there was somebody else making it. There was never any, talk about how they, sharing ideas or anything like that, or even art assets or anything. And we saw the games, and they were strangely similar. And we're, oh my God, that's really weird that that we didn't ever talk or do anything, and yet the games are very much the same. So we kind of got to know these guys that were making this game, and they were called Silicon and Synapse. And so we were chatting, and they said, oh, yeah, well, it's kind of on the DL right now, but we're going to sell our company, and we're going to change our name, and we're going to start making PC games. And I said, oh, awesome. I want to make PC games. We got a great PC game idea, but nobody will do it because RPGs are dead. And so we kept talking to them, and eventually they changed their name to Blizzard, and the game that they were making was Warcraft 1. And so after they finished Warcraft 1, I kept talking, hey, you guys need some beta testers? I know some people at the office that would love to beta test that thing. We kept bugging them for keys and things like that. And everyone was very excited about this game in the office. And we have this great game idea, and we'd love to. They said, well, we're looking for more developers to make PC games for us. And so we said, well, we got this idea. Why don't you come out and we'll pitch it to you? So they came out, and we pitched them Diablo, and they loved it, and they signed the contract. There's a rumor that, that they loved the game idea, but supposedly there were two things that they wanted to change, even from the very pitch. I don't know whether or not it's true or not, but they said, we love the game idea, but it needs to be real time, and it needs to be multiplayer. But anyway, we decided, they still said yes, which was great. We're finally making my dream game, something I've been wanting to do for a very long time. We had to finish kind of the other games that we were doing, the Genesis and Game Boy Quarterback Club. I'm a big sports fan, so we were making sports games. And we were finishing those up, and then we started the development of Diablo. And we signed the contract to do Diablo 1, and we had about 17-ish employees at the time, something like that. And we signed the contract to do Diablo 1 year of development for $300,000. Now, if you do some quick math, you realize that that doesn't pay anything to the 17 people that are supposed to be employed on this project. And so it was kind of a disaster from the get-go. We were really terrible businessmen. We didn't even think about, who cares that we're signing for $300,000? Well, we're making the dream game, so we're going to do that. So development began, and we started working on, kind of the look of the game. It was one of the very first things that we did. This was it's a funny story. This screenshot was like a test thing for the palette and whatnot to see whether or not everything looked okay all together, the monsters and whatnot, whether or not you could see everything. We took this screenshot, and somehow it got put into the hands of the PR department, and this damn screenshot showed up in every freaking article ever about Diablo. And I hated it. It was like, this doesn't look anything like the game. There's no lighting. There's nothing. There's not even a hero on the screen. And yet, even this may have even been on the box. I don't know. But it seemed to crop up anywhere that we did, anytime we did any kind of article at all. That was the screenshot that was displayed. So there's a note to everybody: if you're going to make a screenshot, make sure that it's actually of the game and not some test screenshot, because it'll end up everywhere. So while we were working on the game, deciding what it was going to look like, one of our favorite games at the time was XCOM, the original one, which I think was called like UFO Defense or something like that, XCOM. And we really loved the game, as well as kind of the graphic look of the game. So we decided we were going to kind of emulate this, and in XCOM you had like a box cursor that you could move around to select your units and say where they were going to go and all those kind of things. And so we took a screenshot of the game, which was not an easy thing to do at the time. We took a screenshot of that game, and we took the little shape, the shape, and actually that is the exact size and shape of the tiles in Diablo 1 are exactly the same size, shape, etc. of XCOM. So XCOM had a huge influence on the look. We kind of stole the perspective, and we used that to make the game in all the graphics and stuff. There's a very early screenshot, by the way, of Diablo 1. It actually has a hero on the screen. I'm not even sure if he's centered, though, but I'm not sure if that was a mock-up or what. I don't know what's going on in that screen, by the way. There's weird stuff. Why is the health on the right? So one of the things that we did to kind of improve the look, which was really very different at the time, there's no game that had kind of done this, was we decided to do lighting. And the way that we did the lighting is that we had 256 colors to work with. And we broke up the palette into different sections, kind of 8 hues for the background and 8 hues for everything else. That meant the heroes and the monsters and the UI and all those kind of things. Those were in 128 colors, and the background was in 128 colors. And we organized the palette so that it was, dark to light versions of those particular colors. And then we could, we would take, I guess I'm going to go through the art pipeline first, but the surprise slide. The art pipeline, this was every single magazine article of all time had this. This was your art pipeline. This in the early 90s, every game had this as their art pipeline, which was, here's the sketch, here is the mesh, here's a render without texture, and then there's the texture mapped version of it. So this is how they made the graphics. Anyway, so we would take this and we would render out the sprites onto a sheet, and then we would use this program called Debabbilizer. And this would take the 24-bit images and it would map the graphics and come out with a new sprite sheet that was the particular sprite mapped into this palette. And so when we did the lighting, we would take the original light value, kind of the dungeon light value. Every single tile had a specific light value. Originally, it was on a tile basis, but eventually we made it. Each corner had a light value, and we would then kind of merge those together to come out with a final light value, and then we would use the upper nibble to determine hue, and the kind of the lower nibble to determine what light, which version of the light level to use in that part of the palette. So one thing that came up right away, or not really right away, but about 6 months after, was we were going to have this kind of showdown of real-time versus turn-based. This was very controversial. I was really adamant that this not be a real-time game. I really loved turn-based games. I loved the strategy of turn-based games. I spent many hours playing roguelike games and sweating a character that I had worked on for weeks, and he was down to 1 hit point, and what am I going to do? And then it would die, of course, and I'd cry, and then I'd play again. And so I really loved that feeling. I loved the tension that created. This was not really kind of a mass market idea at the time. It was, it was definitely more niche. I think you can get away with it now, but back then we were trying to go for a bigger audience. So they really wanted to, Blizzard South really wanted us to change it to real time. So we said, okay, well, I no. How about no? And they said, well, yes. And I said, no. So our turn-based was really weird. It was not turn-based like Rogue or other games. It was turns were divided into little segments, and each particular move took a different amount of time. So you can think of it as like tenths of a second or something like that. So something may take 5/10 of a second, or something may take 2 seconds or whatever. And so the different moves would take different amount of times depending on what you were doing. So they said, well, you really should make this real time. And they kept bugging us and influencing some of the people in the studio and saying, oh, don't you think this game would be better if it was real time? And eventually there was kind of a swelling of support for this. Myself and a few people remained adamant that it shouldn't change. And so one day, we said, okay, well, this has been brewing long enough. This is about maybe 5 or 6 months in development. And we're going to get together, and we had an all-company meeting in the kitchen. And we brought it to a vote who wanted to make it turn-based and who wanted to make it real-time. And real-time won in a landslide. And so, after licking my wounds and saying, all right, fine, I called up Blizzard South and I said, well, you guys only are paying us $300,000 for this game, and we can't, that's not enough. So this change is huge. It's going to take us months to go back and have to redo everything. Oh my God, this is putting us way behind schedule. There's no way we're going to make this year. You guys are going to have to pay us a little bit more money to make this change. And they said, okay. Yes. So Friday, that was on a Friday, and it was Friday afternoon, and I sat down, and by Friday evening, I had coded it as a real-time game instead of turn-based. And I got it up and running, and I can remember, exactly what it was like. I mean, it's the most vivid memory I have in my game development, history, that I can remember the moment that I was playing this warrior, and he walked over, and he smashed the skeleton, just walked over, I was like, yes! That is awesome! It went something like this, in theory, if this GIF works. Here we go. Boom, there you go. And it was just like the switch had been turned on. It was like God had appeared, and the clouds parted, and a beam of sunshine came down and right onto my chair, and the angels sang, and it was just wonderful. And so I knew at that time that we had something really special, something very different than I had ever played before, and I knew there was no going back at this point. Turns out that making it real time was a good idea. So, as I've stated, we were bad businessmen, and we weren't doing really well, and our game was taking longer than we anticipated, and we were taking other contracts to help us pay for the development of Diablo. Actually, we did a contract with 3DO on their M2 machine. Their M2 was a second generation of their hardware, and that they later sold to Massachusetts. I just destroy that name every time. That's not it at all. But for $100 million or something like that. So they ended up being, that actually launched them into being a publisher. They had money to become a publisher at that point. And so we were doing this M2 development of football game on the 3DO. And so Blizzard said, well, you guys are doing really well. We love this game. We get along great. Our cultures mesh great, and so we want to acquire you guys. This is about a year into development. We said, oh, thank God. I don't have to deal with paychecks anymore. This is going to be wonderful. And this huge stress release. And so 3DO gets wind of this, and they freak out because we were kind of the leading developer on M2 at the time. Like, oh my God, what are we going to do? So they came and they started having a little bit of a bidding war between Blizzard and 3DO, and were driving the price up. I mean, they were driving their own price up, but the Blizzard was, kind of remained. They gave a little bit, but barely any. And we actually ended up not going with 3DO. We almost sold the company to 3DO. 3DO was offering twice as much money as Blizzard, twice as much. And we turned them down because we believed in what we were doing. We believed in Blizzard. We believed that our games were going to be great, and we wanted to make something great, and our cultures meshed. It was just the right decision for us. This was not a money decision. This was a culture decision. We wanted to make sure that we were building something great. So we became Blizzard North in early 96. They approached us in late 95 to start the process, and I think in February 96 we became Blizzard North. So about 6 months before the end of the game, they came to us with this wacky idea. Hey, what about you guys are making the game multiplayer, right? Yes. Yeah. No, we're not. No. Yeah, we're making it multiplayer. And they said, well, cool, because we've got this idea. We're going to build multiplayer over the internet into the game. I said, that is an awesome idea. That is a superb idea. I have no idea how I'm going to code that. And they said, we'll take care of that part. I said, thank God. Because I don't know anything about networking code at all. It's multiplayer. And they, so about 6 months before the release of the game, they said, we're going to do this. We got this super genius. Blizzard was full of super geniuses, but one in particular is Mike O'Brien, who was the main coder on Battle.net at the time, and he later went on to found Arena.net and made the Guild Wars series of games. And so we were, let's make this Battle.net or whatever. We just need to hook it up and put it into the multiplayer. And I said, yeah, multiplayer. This was my extensive knowledge of how multiplayer worked right there. And they said, okay, well, what's your multiplayer look like? And they came up and spent the weekend kind of looking at our multiplayer, and they go, oh my God, there's no multiplayer. I'm like, yeah, did I mention that? We were getting to it. Magic. It's going to happen. So a few of the guys from Blizzard South moved up to to the Northern California because Blizzard South is down in Irvine, and which is in Southern California. And they moved up to the Bay Area for about 6 months and helped us code and make the game multiplayer and build in Battle.net and things like that. So to come up with that idea that we were going to change this from a single-player game to a multiplayer game 6 months before release was kind of crazy. Anyway, thank God they taught us a lot, and through that process, I learned a lot on how to make not only a better game, but how to make it multiplayer and networking code. And we were able to do the networking code and change it to client server for Diablo II because of the experience that they gave us. So one other thing that we did is that at the time the game was DOS, and DOS was a pain in the ass. DOS games sucked. You had to have a PhD in computer science to run games. It was ridiculous. You had to know what interrupt your sound card was on and what whether or not it was extended memory or expanded memory and blah, 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 blah. Like, it was like you had to make batch files to run games. It was really weird. And so Microsoft said, well, we're gonna make that a lot easier. We've invented this thing called Windows 95, and we're gonna make something called DirectX. And we said, okay, yeah, whatever. You guys have tried that kind of thing before, and WinG, and it didn't work out. You guys dropped it like a few months into development. So we'll kind of wait and see. But they followed through, and they said, well, we're going to do a DirectX demo disc. We're going to make like 1 million of these discs and send them out all over the country. And I said, okay, we'll make DirectX now. And so we changed the game to DirectX and used that demo to make a version of Diablo that we used as a demo, not only in the DirectX, but also in the PC Gamer CD. This was a pack-in with magazines back in the day when magazines existed. And it was for the November 1996 issue which came out in October, so about a couple months before release of the game. And the DirectX CD went out in like September or something like that, late September, I think. So within a few weeks of each other, it was kind of all over the place. And I actually went and I found my demo disc, and I was able to get it running. And here is what it looked like. Few things you'll notice: the interface is very different. The inventory and character are switched to in the final version. They were opposite sides. I
Please help.
have no idea what's going on over here. I don't know what that is.
The butcher. He killed my wife.
That is the worst dialogue of all time. I don't know
In the name of
what we
God,
were thinking.
avenge them.
I'm pretty sure that was somebody in the office doing that voice.
The smell of death surrounds me.
I love this part. I'm missing the barrels. How am I missing the barrels? One other thing that you can't tell from this demo, but that click and hold for walking around wasn't in. And so you had to like clickety, 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 clickety to move. And so that it was a very different experience. And the butcher was on level 1. That went well. Welcome to Diablo. Have fun dying. And so that demo really helped us a lot, and we got tons of great feedback from that, and kind of almost too much feedback. And feedback, you have to realize this is like early days of the internet. People, like we didn't go on forums and get feedback or ask the community things or whatever. That just wasn't kind of done. So, but we got a lot of feedback through a variety of different ways. And we were able to filter that feedback through something called the Strike Team. And they came to us with suggestions on how to improve the game, and we were really open-minded and changed a lot of things, and the game really improved a lot in those 2 months from the demo into to the release of the game. So one other thing that we did is that we kind of took something that I like to call, which sounds terrible but is not meant to be terrible, but it was my mother. At the time, she was not a computer expert. She's much better now. But we used to have something called the mom test for whether or not something was going to be, ready for the game. If my mom can do this, then it's going to be mass marketed enough that we'll be able to have it in the game. So we went with simple things. We love the UI in Doom, just doing a simple interface like that. one of the things that we loved about NHL, we were huge NHL 95, 94, and 95 players in the office. We used to have competitions and tournaments and all sorts of stuff. But one of the things that we loved about that game was that you could get into it almost instantly. And you could be body checking in moments. And that was so impressive. There were so many RPGs at the time that were, you got to create your character. And not just your character, but every character in your party. And there's 5 of them. You're going to spend the next 2 hours doing backstories, re-rolling stats, doing all these kind of things. And we wanted to kind of avoid that completely and put in something that was, we got to get into the action. We got to make this thing as fast as possible. So there were only a few choices. Let's choose our class. Let's put in our name, and let's go. Let's start. You know, the start to action was very, very short. And we learned a lot from other games that we really appreciated that, which was a very different approach than other RPGs at the time. And that interface went not only there, but also went throughout the game. We did a whole bunch of kind of radical, different kind of interface things than that had been done in RPGs. Usually in an RPG, you had this kind of map. It was usually on a piece of parchment, and you could scribble notes on it. It was very complicated, and it would, all the grid squares and stuff would come up. But at the time, one of the games that came out right around that time, right before Diablo, was Dark Forces, which is a game by Nihilistic and LucasArts, and they had this overlay map here in the game that I loved. I loved the fact that it was so simple. I could tell what I was doing. It was perfect. This is exactly what I wanted for Diablo, which was a much different approach than RPGs at the time. And eventually, this became kind of a meme in the office in that you want to do interface the cool Dark Forces way or the crappy old way. And so as time went on, everything was like, we're going to Dark Forces this. And that became definitely something that we talked about a lot. And so the strike team did all sorts of things, changing the interface, improving the interface. There was no multiplayer stuff here. And so getting this all set up, your characters and your quests and the map and the menu and things like that. We switched the panels. We made the graphics a little fancier. One of the things that we did was we added, in RPGs at the time, a lot of times items had weight, and you had a certain amount of weight of things that you could carry. And we wanted to simplify that, but represent it. So bigger items took up more space in your inventory, and smaller items, less heavy, would take up smaller amounts of inventory space. And so therefore, inventory Tetris was born. I'm not sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing, but it was definitely different. And so all these kind of things kind of were really very great. There's a quest log there on the left, and that got moved down to the panel. Anyway, a much cleaner, much better looking interface. In fact, one of the things that you'll notice the most here, this is one of the reasons I want to talk about this, is that what is absent from this? There's no skill bar. This skill bar was put in the last 2 months of development. That's kind of mind-blowing that something that important to the game changed at the last minute, and really for the better. And it just became such a staple of the game to be able to press the potions and the timing, and for that to go in the last 2 months is crazy. So we crunched a lot last 9-ish months or so. I crunched. I worked every day. I averaged probably 16 to 18 hours a day working. Was a good time. My wife was pregnant. Yes, my wife was pregnant. And the baby was due at the end of the year. You can see where this is going. yes, the contractions started early. And I was at the office. Oh, God. Turned out to be a false alarm, and the baby was actually born 3 days after we shipped. So thank you so much for waiting. That was really nice of her to stay in there for an extra few weeks. So we finally got the game all together, and we decided, well, yeah, people in the office have been playing a lot. We had a working version of the game all the time. It was really important that we iterate on this, and people were really addicted to it in the office. They would stay late. They would just play. And so we finally got everything all put together, and we were going to say, all right, the first person in the office to kill Diablo will win $100. And so people were excited, and they at the time there was a skill in the game called blood exchange. And this swapped on a percentage basis your hit points with the monster's hit points. Wow, what a bad idea this was. And so Ben Haas found this blood exchange skill and rushed down to Diablo and killed him. He was like this really sophisticated AI, had all these different, he just went in there, blood exchange, dead. I was like, okay, that skill's out of there. So he won the $100, but he cheated. Okay, he played fair, but we had to remove that skill. Anyway, so then Diablo was released on the last day of 1996, and we got all sorts of weird things like, 1998 best role-playing game because of the fact that it came out on the last day of 96. Some people didn't say it was still 97, so the awards that came out in 98 were giving us awards for people thinking they came out in 97. Anyway, that was it was an incredible. We had no idea that it was going to be such a hit. I mean, we knew that we had something special, especially late in the project. We could tell that it was going to be something very different, very special. But when I first started making this game, it's like, if we could sell 20,000 copies of this game, we are going to be able to make more. Yes, we're going to be able to make more games. And to have such a hit was just such a blessing, and I am so happy that I had the opportunity to participate in such a wonderful game and work with the people that I worked, incredible people that I worked with, and it was just such a treat and a real team effort and an amazing thing. So you can follow me on Twitter. That's my main social media thing that I do. It's at David Brevik. I will tweet out the link to the original Diablo pitch document. If anybody wants to take a look at that, you can download the PDF and look at it. It's actually in my Twitter feed already, but I will retweet it later. And thank you. Let's get some questions.
Okay, no time to waste. First question.
Thank you, David, for your talk. I wanted to ask about how did you come across Matt Ullman, because we all know this iconic Diablo soundtrack, and was he a part of the team from the beginning, or?
Yeah, Matt was started at the company before Diablo began. He actually did music on our other games as well, not just Diablo. He was, I think, in the top 5 employees at Blizzard North, at Condor at the time. So yeah, he was involved all along, and a real delight. I still have his mixtape that he sent me as his resume. Out of the blue, I don't even think we were hiring an audio person. He just sent it to me, and he just kept pestering me about, oh my, have you listened to my mixtape? I'm, yeah, sure. And eventually, I relented, actually listened to it, and brought him in for an interview, and we hired him right away. And he was such a an amazing person to work with, an incredible artist. Again, there were just so many really talented people that worked on Diablo.
Okay, do we have any questions more? Yep.
Hi. Why the idea of zooming in Diablo? What is the purpose of this particular feature, in your opinion?
Zooming in? I don't know what that means.
You mean that you can, during the game, you can zoom in the view, so the character becomes bigger and the whole.
Oh yeah, I think that was originally put in because people like to see their character better. Like, we didn't have a paper doll like many RPGs did at the time where you can see a big view of your character. So this was something that we wanted to put in to give people the opportunity to kind of look at their new equipment and whatnot. That was the original idea behind it.
Okay, zooming in, what next feature we want to check?
I actually read that pitch you talked about, and I noticed that there was a development schedule for the game in it. And it was like
It was realistic.
1 year, yeah. And I wanted to ask you, how would you compare that schedule, your expectations for the schedule, for the development, to what it really looked like? Like, what was the biggest surprise for you?
You know, I'd like to give a really great answer here, but the fact of the matter is we were just, you know, three dudes with computers kind of, you know, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. We didn't know how long it would take. And in all fairness, the fact that it was a single player, DOS, like all these kind of things that changed from turn-based and whatnot to a real-time game and multiplayer and all that stuff, the design exploded in scope. It still took us only 2 years, but which was an eternity at the time. That was a long time in development. But you know, I think that there were a lot of things that we just didn't understand or didn't know. We'd never been through a project like that before. Usually the projects that we had worked on, there was kind of a strict deadline for when the project needed to be done because we needed the cartridge to be manufactured and out in time for some particular date, and so we had a deadline. But that was not the case with this, other than we wanted to hit Christmas, but it was obvious 6 months into the game that we weren't going to make Christmas the first year, and we really tried to make Christmas second, but obviously missed it.
Hi. First of all, I think I won't be the only one here who'll say that playing Diablo was a formative experience for what I expected out of video games after playing it. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
But my question would be about Hellfire. What was the story behind Hellfire being developed by Sierra? Was it?
Yes.
Instead of you guys. Why did you? Was it your decision to kind of? Let it go, and how, and yeah, and what was your reaction to the what did you think about that expansion set?
Whew. I'm not sure if I can talk freely about this yet. So at the time, right after we were acquired and became Blizzard North, Blizzard was owned by a company called Davidson and Associates, and they made educational games like Math Blaster and Reading Blaster and stuff. And they were the #1 educational entertainment company in the world at the time. And Sierra Online was the #1 entertainment publisher in the world at the time. And a company called CUC, CompuCard, bought both companies like right around the exact same time. So Blizzard, Sierra Online, Davidson Associates, all of these were owned by one company called CompuCard. Later became Sendent, which was the biggest scam in the history of Wall Street to this day. I think that the biggest sell-off of a single stock in a single day, the entire books were cooked. It was a complete disaster. That was the mid-'90s. It was kind of the Enron of the mid-'90s. And so we so Sierra and Blizzard were kind of they were owned by the same. We were like, whatever, sister companies or whatever, because we were owned by the same company. And so they were looking for work, and we said, oh, we like that Diablo game. It's selling well. When are you guys going to make an expansion? We said, oh, we're not making an expansion. We're making Diablo II because, cheating. And they said, well, okay, but money. And we said, all right, well, okay. He said, well, we got a dev team over at Sierra that would love to do this. I said, all right, I guess. And so we set up a design document, and they came out, and we taught them the code, and we went through, this is what the game's going to be, this is what the expansion's going to be, and stuff like that. And then they promptly ignored all of that and made Hellfire, which was, nothing like we talked about, nothing that we had designed. And they sent it to me, and I said, no, we're not going to publish this. This is ridiculous. This is nothing like we asked. And we had these big disagreements, and then they just published it without my say. So it went out against my will and wishes, and it was published without really endorsement from Blizzard North, and it was something that we really weren't really happy about. Anyway, so it was a big blow up between Blizzard and Sierra Online after that, and really that was kind of the start of the Blizzard will answer not to the parent company but to themselves, and that really kind of was a real big moment in the history of Blizzard and who's going to tell us what to do.
Okay, I will allow myself to ask the last question that is connected to what you said. You observe the games industry, what's happening around the world, and we see that many of the companies are now exploiting their franchise, like doing several titles around one idea, especially on mobile. We say, let's say Rovio did 20 plus games on Angry Birds. There's merchandising everywhere. Do you feel that there is any border for that? Like, let's say Die Hard 4, yeah? It was too far with exploiting one merchandise. Is there any rule of thumb when you have to look for new idea?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I know the answer. The answer really comes down to people will keep making new versions of the same game when they're selling $1 billion worth of merchandise. I mean, if people want this, they're going to keep making them. And I don't know if there's really that's a bad thing or not. I think that new versions afford the opportunity to put in new features and experiment and change whatever it is, whatever game it is, on its head, and give you a new experience. And it's a much safer thing for publishers to do because they already have a built-in audience. And so if they're going to make a choice between, we're going to invest, let's say, $100 million in product A or $100 million into product B, and product A is a sequel to a popular and a hit game, and B is an original fly-by-night, who knows whether or not it's going to work or not, the guy that's responsible for signing these projects, his job is on the line, and he's going to sign something that's safer for his job. And so, is that a bad thing? Yes and no. It stifles creativity, but at the same time, there's plenty of ways to make smaller indie games now and publish them yourselves, and we're not reliant upon the 10 games or whatever they're coming out from a big publisher every year. We can, there are hundreds and hundreds of games and different options now. It's very different than it was, 10 years ago or 15 years ago when there were only the big publishers were making things. And you had to have a distribution chain. You had to be able to move boxes and put them on shelves and stuff like that. And that was it was a very different time. So I don't know. It's I think that there's still a lot of it's a risk-reward kind of thing, and it's a lot easier to sign something that you know is going to be a big hit than take a big risk with your career and sign something that may or may not work.
But still, there's some encouragement for indie developers who look for some original ideas.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's what's great about indie development is that it allows you to do whatever you want, and we're kind of redefining what games are, and you're getting different kinds of experiences, and it's a lot like the PC games of the early 90s, where it was a lot of that, innovation and crazy ideas came out, and then it kind of became such a big business, and it became so expensive to make assets and so expensive to make games that it became a little bit more conservative. But with digital distribution, it's opened it back up, and I see a lot more creativity these days.
Would you like to share any game title that was in last, let's say, 2 or 3 years for you extremely inspiring or surprising? Something like you said that, oh God, this is something totally new. Is there anything that comes to your mind just like that, or?
Oh, I've played a lot of things. I don't know if there's anything that's really quote unquote new or revolutionary, but there are a lot of really great games I played. I just got finished playing a lot of Stardew Valley, which I really loved. And yes, I was very into the farming. Yes. Diablo loves farming. And milking cows. Well, I had cows in the game. Come on. And so I've played a lot of, let's say, FTL and Minecraft and a whole bunch of games that have had very different kind of designs. I'm much more of an indie game player than I am, big AAA kind of games. I just find the little games a little bit more interesting to me, and I play a lot more of those. And I play a lot of mobile games as well. I don't know, play is a little bit of an exaggeration. A lot of them are, energy based, and I just, and then I'm done for another hour, and then I do it again. And I love that kind of addictive gameplay. I don't know why, but I do.
Okay, I think that this is a good wrap up for this session. Please, let's give David a loud applause for this awesome talk.